Hear me okay? Nodding heads. Excellent. Well, Andrea, if you could progress to the next slide.
All right. Good evening. One moment here. For some reason, hold on. Sometimes it
Freezes up on us.
freezes up, yeah. Just kidding.
So now is a great time while we're having technological difficulties to say hi in the chat box and let us know what your favorite lake is.
Okay. Oh, we're getting closer. Dun, da, da, da. Let's try that. There you go.
Okay, so like I said, tonight is part 2 of our webinar series. We're going to be talking about the ecology of New Hampshire lakes. It will be presented by our very own Andrea LaMoreaux and I. Next slide. So just some quick meeting management. We have 80 people registered for tonight's webinar, and it will be recorded, but we are going to keep participants muted for the duration so it doesn't get too crazy. You can leave your camera on or off, but if you leave it on, remember that people can see you. And if you have questions at any time, you can submit your questions through the chat box. We will have Jessica Sayers monitoring the chat box. She may get back to you on some of your questions in real time, but if not, she will ask Andrea and I your questions at the end. And after the session, you're going to receive a follow-up email asking you to evaluate the session. Please give us your feedback and tell us how we can do even better. Slide. So our main host this evening, Andrea LaMoreaux, is our very own New Hampshire Lakes Vice President. She is the expert in lake ecology. I will be her co-presenter. I am Krystal Balanoff, New Hampshire Lakes Conservation Program Coordinator. And Jessica Sayers is sort of our mediator. She'll be monitoring the chat box. She's the Conservation Program Assistant here at New Hampshire Lakes and also very, very knowledgeable on lake ecology. Slide. So a little bit about us. Hopefully most of you know New Hampshire Lakes as an organization by now, but just some backstory for the newbies in the audience. We are the only member-supported nonprofit organization working statewide for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. We are membership supported, so please become a member today. Slide. And our mission is to keep all of New Hampshire's lakes clean and healthy now and for our future generations. And to do that, we work with and through our local partners to promote clean water policies and responsible use for our lakes. Slide. And to do that, we have we approach it in 3 directions. Our advocacy program to give our lakes a voice in legislation and policy. We have statewide conservation programs such as our award-winning Lake Coast Aquatic Invasive Species Prevention Program. It's a courtesy boat inspection program. And our relatively new Lake Smart, Lake Friendly Living program. And I know we have some people in the audience tonight that have recently had Lake Smart visits. And of course, our outreach program so that we can keep our lake community members educated and to educate and inspire our next generation of lake stewards. So we have 4 webinars in this lineup. Tonight is the ecology of New Hampshire's lakes. If you missed our managing recreational safety that happened last Wednesday, you can find that webinar recording on our website as well as the slides. And stay tuned for the next 2 on management of plants in New Hampshire and management of fish in New Hampshire. Slide. So I've already introduced Andrea and I, but Andrea has a ton of experience in lake ecology. She's been working for New Hampshire Lakes for a long time. And prior to that, she worked at DES. And prior to that, she was a consultant. And my goodness, she knows so much about this. And she's also my #1 mentor. Slide. I see you blushing. So let's dive into it. Next slide, Andrea.
All right. Well, thank you for that very nice introduction. And I would say Krystal is, again, our conservation program coordinator, and she's been with us My goodness, for a handful of years now, and prior to that, she was a lake host, so she has got a lot of lake experience under her belt as well. So,
to start off, Andrea, why don't you tell us how many lakes and ponds there even are in New Hampshire?
all right, want everyone to take just a quick second, think of how many lakes do you think there are in New Hampshire? And I think some of you will be surprised. There are approximately 1,000 lakes and ponds in New Hampshire. There truly is something for nearly everyone when it comes to our lakes and ponds. People who love to boat, people who love to sail, paddle, kayak, water sports, water skiing, slalom skiing. My daughter just learned to slalom ski this summer, pretty cool. Tubing, wakeboarding or wake surfing, fishing, and of course, just having fun with your friends and family and jumping off that dock into the water and having fun. So, I know a lot of you have probably been doing those things this summer with your family and friends, and it's pretty cool. Here in New Hampshire, we can enjoy our lakes during the winter too. Ice sailing, ice fishing, lots of fishing tournaments in the state, and just family fun. Dog sledding on a lot of our lakes during the winter. Ice skating, cross-country skiing, ice racing, snowmobiling, even ice harvesting. This is up at Squam Lake, and many of our lakes, they still do harvest ice, kind of an old tradition, but pretty cool and pretty fun. And this is a big hockey tournament, the pond hockey tournament up on Lake Winnipesaukee. So just lots of different ways our lakes are used and enjoyed. This is Alton Bay, Lake Winnipesaukee. We have the only FAA approved ice runway in New Hampshire, in the country, in the lower 48 states on Lake Winnipesaukee near Alton. So pretty cool. Lakes and ponds truly are an integral part of New Hampshire's quality of life, our economy, and our heritage. And this is a lovely sort of old time photo of steamboats and the grand hotels, and they're just the beautiful boats. So, part of the ecology of our lakes is how we use and then we enjoy them and how important they are to our state and to our lifestyle. So New Hampshire's lakes, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Our lakes are, New Hampshire is home to some of the cleanest and healthiest lakes and ponds in the country. This happens to be Newfound Lake up in Bristol, New Hampshire.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah. What?
What's the difference between a lake and a pond, Andrea?
Well,
I know you want to get into how they got there, but.
Oh, good question. What is the difference between a lake or a pond? Krystal, this is one of the most common questions I get as a limnologist, a lake biologist. So think about that for a minute. What do you guys think? What's the difference between a lake or a pond? I'm sure you all have an idea. The naming of a water body as a lake or a pond in New Hampshire is really kind of arbitrary. Whoever got there first named it a lake or a pond. Some of you are probably thinking, well, a pond's bigger than a lake, smaller than a lake's bigger than a pond's shallower than a lake is deeper than a pond. In New Hampshire, you can't go by, the name if it's a lake or a pond. Loon Lake in Plymouth, near where I live, is called a lake. It's 45 acres in size, but Loon Pond in Gilmanton is a little bit bigger at 49 acres. So that's kind of a little bit of trivia there. Technically, there is no difference between a lake or pond in New Hampshire based on what it's named. So kind of a little fun tidbit there. Thanks for indulging me, Krystal. I love that question.
My pleasure.
So how did our lakes get here? Most of our lakes are about 15,000 years old. They formed when the glaciers retreated about 15,000 years ago. As the glaciers, New Hampshire was covered with about a mile of ice, pretty heavy. And as that ice slowly melted and retreated back north up to the poles, it carved out big big linear type basins and moved out rock and stone and then deposited it in other places. And on the left here, you have just sort of a simple diagram of glacial retreat and kind of what it leaves behind, you know, little pockets, what us limnologists call kettle lakes, and left esker lakes, so sort of big, long skinny things. And the ice melted and the rains came, and these bodies of water filled up and continue to fill up today with rain, snow melt, and also from water from rivers and tributaries. And that happens to be looking down on, I don't know if you can see my pointer here, Lake Winnipesaukee in the middle, and Winnisquam down to the lower part, and Newfound Lake kind of over to the left-hand side of the picture there. Some of our New Hampshire's lakes were formed by landslides. A Profile Lake up in Franconia Notch is an example of that. We have some lakes that were formed by meandering rivers. Over time, rivers get, you know, very sinuous and actually kind of cut back on themselves, and then decide to go another direction and leave what's called an oxbow lake. So if any of you had ever been to our old office in Concord, we were right on Horseshoe Pond, and that's an oxbow lake there. Some of our lakes were formed by dams. I think Moore Reservoir up in Littleton, New Hampshire is maybe the 6th or 7th biggest lake in the state. Technically, it's the Connecticut River dammed up. Many of our natural lakes do have dams on them. Dams do regulate water flow and sometimes make our lakes, our natural lakes, just a little bit bigger. But again, most of our lakes are formed by glaciers, and they're about 15,000 years old. So, what is the biggest lake in New Hampshire? Krystal, do you have an idea what the biggest lake in New Hampshire might be?
Winnipesaukee.
Yes, Lake Winnipesaukee. It's about 44,000 acres, about 288 miles of shoreline. And this number is up for debate a little bit. There are about 365 islands, about 274 which are habitable. So pretty unique glacial lake there. Again, the scouring and the dropping of boulders here and there, and dropping of you know, sediment making islands. Pretty interesting.
I'm always curious to know what it means, habitable.
There are some that are pretty darn small. Krystal, what do you think the deepest lake in New Hampshire might be?
Well, we took a really nice boat tour last summer, and I remember that it's Newfound.
It is Newfound Lake, again, at approximately 182 feet deep. I know sometimes people, you know, come up with some crazy stories about lakes in New Hampshire that are 300 or 400 feet deep, but that's my biologist friends at DES who go out and monitor, survey the lakes using GPS and bathymetry, special tools say, you know, that Newfound Lake so far, their data shows is the deepest at 182 feet. So, yeah. So, just a brief introduction to our lakes, but our lakes change as the seasons change, and we talked about we can use our lakes in the summer and in the winter here. So this is kind of a neat picture showing the same you know, scene, just sort of a progression over time. So I'm going to give you a crash course here, kind of in lake physics. If you don't get it all, don't worry, you have the slides to refer to. But again, how the water, really, lakes change from season to season, but really how the water moves in a lake, that's what's really changing from season to season. And I'm going to go through each of these 4 diagrams here in the following slides. So during the summer, and I know someone in the audience here is going to recognize this lake. Shirley Green, our board member, probably recognizes at her favorite lake, Krystal Lake. But during the summer, our deeper lakes divide into 3 layers based on temperature. The sun's beating down, you know, warming the, you know, water surface. And if you remember back to like chemistry class way back when, you may remember that warmer water is typically less dense. It's not as heavy or thick as colder water. So the warmer, less dense water in the summer floats towards the surface of the lake, and it floats upon cooler, denser water below. And as the summer goes on, the sunlight gets further and further in the lake, pushing, you know, the temperature, the warm water a little bit further down into the lake. But as the summer, again, as the summer goes down, that middle layer of rapidly changing temperature from warm to relatively cool, which is called the thermocline, the rapidly changing layer of temperature and density, it moves down, and really the bottom of the lake gets really sealed off from the rest of the atmosphere. And this is really important because any animals, any critters, you know, down towards the bottom of the lake, whatever oxygen and nutrients are in there, you know, at the beginning of summer, that's what they've got to survive for the rest of the summer. And if you fish, you probably have heard the term thermocline before. Anglers, or people who fish, like to find the cline. They use special temperature probes, excuse me, to find that layer. I mean, they take measurements every couple of feet to find that layer where the temperature is rapidly changing, because it turns out that's where the fish really like to hang out. There's often a lot of plankton, algae, that microscopic stuff that hangs out in the middle there. So then, you know, lakes in fall, after summer, you know, right now, actually, our lakes are starting to cool off. And what that allows the lake to do is it sort of breaks up the barriers between those three different temperature layers. So the winds, the autumn winds come and sort of mix the water all up and breaking down those barriers. And by the end of the fall, this is called turnover, by the end of the fall, the lake is sort of rejuvenated again. All the oxygen and all the nutrients are mixed throughout the whole lake. And that's really good. If you're a fish or an aquatic, you know, organism living in the lake, you know, it's really helpful to have, you know, new oxygen and everything fully mixed into the lake. Yeah, that's what I just said.
So Andrea, I think we take advantage of this process, but as we get later in fall, something really cool and unique happens to our lakes.
Totally cool, actually.
Very cool.
Pretty unusual. Again, thinking back to chemistry class, when water approaches the freezing mark, something really cool happens with the water molecules. They actually expand. You know, usually things in nature, when they get cold, they shrink, but water is really unique and it expands. And so at some point, you know, more often than not, most of our lakes and ponds are at some point going to be covered with a layer of ice during the winter. Ice is colder and less dense than the water below it. And so this is why lakes don't freeze from the bottom up. So just think about your, you know, glass of water you might have had for dinner and the ice cubes float. You know, that ice is less dense than the water below it. So this is really important if you're, you know, a fish. You're going to have this safe zone to hang out in the lake, and under the ice, the temperature of the water stays about the same the whole winter. But the longer the winter goes on, the longer the winter goes on, some of that oxygen will get used up because, again, the bottom of the lake is sort of sealed off from the atmosphere. And our lakes are pretty unique in New Hampshire. Not all lakes in the country freeze. So again, we get that extra season of enjoyment on our lakes and ponds. And so just sort of repeating what I just said. So again, during the winter, the lakes are sealed off from the atmosphere. And again, it's fairly well mixed. And again, as the winter goes on, the amount of oxygen that's available at the bottom of the lake slowly declines as fish use it up and as organic material, plants and dead algae and stuff decay and are decomposed. So sometimes if you have a really long winter, a really long ice cover, you may see in the spring when the ice comes off, you may see some dead fish, what's called a fish kill. If we have a really long ice cover, that may cause some fish to perish because they didn't have quite enough oxygen to survive. So then lakes in spring. Lakes, once again, like in fall, they're rejuvenated. The ice comes off, the winds mix it up, they distribute. You know, the lake becomes pretty much the same temperature, again, mixing oxygen and nutrients throughout the entire basin again, which again is really good if you're a fish or an aquatic organism to get that, you know, fresh new oxygen supply and nutrient supply. And this again just sets the stage for the lake to start warming up again in summer. So that was a really quick crash course in lake physics. I'm happy to answer questions later. And again, you'll have this presentation for reference further on. But I'm going to turn it over to Krystal now.
Thanks, Andrea. It's really fascinating to be reminded of this natural process and the physics of our lakes and what's going on beneath the water surface, because that process of turnover and, you know, what oxygen levels we have and where how our lakes are stratified, excuse me, throughout the seasons is essential to the type of life that our lakes support. And there is a huge diversity of different plants, animals, and other organisms that rely on this process for their life cycle and their reproduction and general health and well-being.
Absolutely.
Slide. So we're going to get into some interesting things that you might see in our lakes here in New Hampshire, but I just want to give another quick plug that our upcoming webinar is on plants in New Hampshire lakes. If you're interested in the ecology and management of what the plants are in our lakes, you're going to want to tune into our next webinar with the one and only Amy Smagula from the Department of Environmental Services. And if you're interested in fish, then you'll want to tune in to the following webinar presented by Scott Decker of New Hampshire Fish and Game. So I'm really looking forward to both of those because they'll get into much more depth. And some of you may not know this, but in addition to that natural process of turnover, our lakes are also aging over time. Much like people, our lakes do age. They get older, and as they get older, they naturally fill in with the decaying plants and algae and sediment that washes in. Slide. And just like we can contribute to our own rapid aging, human activities can also speed up the lake aging process too, and that's mainly through bringing in sediment and pollution. As our landscape, i.e. the watershed, is developed by development or redevelopment of houses, farming practices, and our recreational activities, our cities and things like that, this kind of activity can bring pollution into our lakes, whether it is through a stream that eventually carries it down or directly into our lake itself. It always ends up in our lakes at some point, and that increase in pollution causes that aging process to speed up quite a bit. There are a couple different stages of lake aging. We can start with the what we call the young lake, an oligotrophic lake. An example of this would be Winnipesaukee or Newfound. These are generally large, deep, cold lakes that support very little algae growth and cold water fisheries. And as that lake gets slightly older, some sediment starts to fill in at the bottom, but not too much. But that additional nutrients supports a larger diversity of plant life and starts to see a change in the type of fishery that it supports. And as it gets even older, you'll see much more plant diversity, but only warm water fish species. And the oxygen level in the lake decreases down near the bottom, and we call this a eutrophic lake. So we go from oligotrophic, cold, young, clear lakes, mesotrophic, sort of our middle-aged lake, down to eutrophic, which is the older aged lake. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we do want to have this happen over a natural time span and not an accelerated time span. Slide. The good news is that we can do something about it. You can actually do your part to keep lakes slowed down in their aging process by the way you live on the lake. So living in a lake-friendly way is the main way that you can contribute to, not to lake aging, but to a slower process of lake aging. And what that looks like is your year-round approach to living on your property in a way that minimizes the water running off your property and the sediment and the pollution that it could be carrying with it into the lake. And just a little plug for our Lake Smart program. You can participate in this program, and you can start off by taking our online free self-assessment to see how lake smart you and your property is. So that was a quick spiel about lake aging, and we're going to continue on here with some of the interesting things that you might see in New Hampshire lakes, and certainly some of the bizarre things that have been reported to us at New Hampshire Lakes over the years. So I'm hoping that Andrea and I can sort of share these slides with one another. So aside from milfoil monsters, some other things that we might see. Andrea, do you want to take this one away?
Yeah, I've gotten this call many times over my career. Help, someone dumped yellow paint into the lake. This usually happens May and June. And no worries, it's just pine pollen. But it can, you know, in areas where it blows into the shore and kind of piles up in each other, can get really cakey and pretty gross and alarming looking. It does, of course, contain some phosphorus, the nutrient that we are trying to limit getting into our lakes, because phosphorus, you know, speeds up the growth of plants and algae. But this is pine pollen, and it's, you know, it's pretty much, it's a natural thing, and it's nothing to be too concerned about. If you happen to be allergic to pine pollen like I am, that's no fun. But I have had people, you know, go out there to their lake and scoop it out and net it out, and, you know, hey, why not? It gives you a little exercise, and you are removing a small amount of phosphorus from the lake. But yeah, so next time you see this, or your friend or your neighbor down the street says, oh my God, you got to see this, you know, it's just pollen. So.
And that color is really important. It's that bright yellow.
Yeah, sometimes maybe a little greenish, but, you know, mostly that bright yellow, and it gets sort of brown and as it decays. All right, what else we got here?
Oh, you know, this actually caught me back in the day when I was a lake host. The first time I saw foam in the lake, I was alarmed. I thought that there might be detergent in the lake, or, you know, some sort of chemical that was causing this foaming action to happen. But I learned that it wasn't the case. And there's actually a fun science experiment that you can do to tell if it is a natural process or if there is actually a detergent in the lake. Just take some of that foam in a jar with a little bit of water and shake it up. If those bubbles disperse and go away, it's a natural process. If it produces more bubbles and more foam, then it's likely a detergent. And natural foam will also smell a little yucky, whereas obviously a detergent would smell probably more perfumey.
Yeah, this is another, you know, question I've gotten a lot over my career. And the other thing you can do is collect, if you're concerned that it is a detergent after doing some simple field testing, you can bring a jar of it into the Department of Environmental Services, and they can actually do an optical brightener test. I don't know if you've ever, like, you know, gone into a club and you're seen, you know, wearing a light colored shirt and your shirt kind of gets that purplish color. It's because the detergent that you use to wash your clothes has optical brighteners in it. So DES actually has a special light that they can use to test water for optical brighteners, which would signal that there's detergent.
Very cool.
All right, what else?
Ooh, this one. So I know that some folks on Lake Winnipesaukee found this recently, and boy, was the community curious about what it was. They thought, oh, was it fish eggs? Was it a jelly ball? Is it an alien? And a couple of other bizarre suggestions. But the good news is that this is a bryozoan, and actually an indicator of good water quality. This is a healthy community. It's a colony of bryozoans that you know, live together to form this jelly-like mass. And this mass can be attached to docks or lily pads or attached to twigs and things. And they're actually filter feeders. And they can feed larger aquatic organisms as well.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw this, I was doing VLAP, a Volunteer Lake Assessment Program water sampling with DES up at Rand Pond in Goshen. And I had never seen one of these before. And was very alarming. So
Startling.
come back to the lab and, Jody Connor, for those of you who remember, I brought it back, of course. He was all so excited. I had made his day bringing this in so he could tell me all about it.
Now, I do want to note that a colony of bryozoans won't always look exactly like this. This is a really good example of one that kind of looks like a brain, but you might see smaller clumps. They might be smoother. They could have, a slightly different greenish tinge to them. But when in doubt, send us a picture because we love seeing this stuff.
All right, we get this call, and I know our colleagues at DES do as well. Hey, the lake looks like someone dumped blue-green paint into it. Uh-oh. This is likely a cyanobacteria bloom. So basically toxic bacteria that act like algae, which may in fact be toxic to humans and to pets and other wildlife. And when I say toxic, I mean depending on the species of cyanobacteria, it could be a skin irritant, or it could actually be a gastrointestinal irritant, or worst case scenario, a neurotoxin. So if you or your pet inadvertently ingested this water, you could, and also potentially liver damage as well. You could have some serious medical complications. So if you ever go out to the lake, and again, it looks like someone dumped blue-green paint into it, or it looks sort of more like pea soup or paint chips, don't go into the water. Keep your pets out, keep your family out, and take a picture, send it to DES. We had in our last webinar series, Amanda Murby McQuaid, the DES harmful algal bloom coordinator, presenting. And she, wants people to text her pictures, and you send her a message, not necessarily collecting a sample, but you send her a picture and she'll let you know what next steps are. And DES does issue advisories for lakes that have toxic cyanobacteria blooms, but they really rely on you all, people that live around the lake, to let them know when it looks like someone dumped blue-green paint into the lake.
And right away, cyanobacteria isn't something that you want to observe and be like, that was strange. Maybe I'll send an email tomorrow, because they are a strange and fickle beast. And if you see a cyanobacteria in the morning, if you see this kind of bloom or make this observation in the morning, it could look very different. It could sink back beneath the surface later on in the day. So the quicker that you take action and get a picture and some information to DES, the better.
Definitely. All right. Ooh, how about this one? So what's this yellow-green cotton candy stuff floating around the lake, particularly now, at the end of this summer?
I know.
It's filamentous green algae, and it's common this time of year. It's native, it's not exotic. It didn't come from somewhere else, and it's not known to be toxic. So, not as concerning as, a cyanobacteria bloom. It does, however, indicate that we have some elevated nutrients in the water. And of course, this naturally happens as the summer goes on. But over the years, if you're seeing more and more filamentous green algae in your lake or pond, it may mean that you're having some elevated nutrients over time. So if you want to make sure or be more confident that what you're seeing is filamentous green algae and not a cyanobacteria bloom, our friends at DES encourage people to do the stick test. You stick a stick into the water where you're seeing this stuff, and if you pull it out, sort of like this paddle over here, and it comes out as strands, filaments, it's not likely a cyanobacteria. It's not likely that toxic cyanobacteria. It's likely a filamentous green algae. But I do know that, again, lakes are seeing more and more of this over time, and it is concerning. It is kind of gross looking, but less concern.
And always better safe than sorry. If you're ever concerned with what you see, you can still take a picture and send that in to DES so that they can let you know what it is that you're looking at.
Absolutely. All right, Chris, I'll let you take this one.
So you might see this sometimes in wetlands, sometimes in the more shallow areas around the lake, maybe even more obvious this year as our lakes they're much lower than we're used to. And you might think, oh my goodness, is this an oil spill? Is this some kind of petrochemical that's gotten into our lake? And that's a great question, and there's a way that you can tell. So this probably isn't actually a petroleum spill, but we want to make sure. And the way that you can do that is you can just take a stick and you can poke the surface of it. Now, if it's a petroleum product, it's going to swirl apart and then swirl back together. If it's a natural process, if this is just a biofilm, when you stick your stick into it, it's going to break up into geometric patterns and not swirl back together. So if it breaks up into those geometric patterns and doesn't swirl back together, then it's nothing to worry about. But if you do this stick test and you think, oh gee, no, this is definitely a petroleum spill, you're going to want to make sure that you report that to DES. If it's just a regular biofilm, nothing to be concerned about, just a normal process.
Definitely. And these little critters look like jellyfish. Is that
freshwater jellyfish? Am I seeing things?
Is that possible, Krystal? Do we have jellyfish in our lakes?
It certainly is. I actually just texted a friend of mine today because a couple of years ago, they were out fishing on a very small pond in Nottingham, New Hampshire that they had hiked out to go fishing. And they were like, I think I'm seeing things. There are jellyfish in this pond. And it was really exciting to be able to let them know that this is a rare occurrence, a rare sighting, but yeah, freshwater jellyfish do exist. They don't sting. And if you see them one year, you might not see them the next year. You might not see them the next week. So very, very cool. Andrea, is there anything else you want to say about these?
Yeah, I'd say
polyps?
They're pretty mysterious. And if you are going to see them, this is the time of year you're going to see them. They usually end up, coming out of hiding, coming out of their resting stage at the bottom of the lake, at the end of the summer. And I know DES biologists were just out last week and just took a video of just the most amazing bloom of jellyfish. And so they're definitely, out there in some of our lakes right now. So you're not seeing things if you see this. It is truly a jellyfish.
It's truly a jellyfish.
So for those of you who haven't been to our website, we do have common questions about lakes, a searchable sort of what's this in the lake on our website at nhlakes.org under the About Lakes tab. So please do go to our website. We also have an article library where we talk about all sorts of different things that having to do with lakes, stories that staff have experienced, stories that people have told us about things they've seen in lakes, and more than you, it would be I think you'll learn a lot from our website. And Krystal, we have lots of time left here, so I'm looking forward to hearing from Jessica to see if we have any questions from our participants tonight.
Actually, either we have a shy audience or you both have done so well. No questions at the moment. So if anyone wants to submit anything, now's the time.
Folks, that was a really high elevation approach to talk about, lake mixing and the process of aging. So I imagine, maybe you're having some personal questions about how your lifestyle could contribute to lake aging, or more about what those unique processes can result in. Like Andrea mentioned, fish kills can be a normal occurrence in our lakes depending on the season and where those fish are in their reproductive cycles and things like that. So now's a good time to let us know.
Yeah, and I actually did get a question from Anne, and the question was, what in the lake causes it to foam? And Anne, excellent question, and I'm sorry we didn't include that. So generally, lakes foam naturally. Lakes naturally have oils in them, sort of what Krystal was talking about biofilms. Anytime, you know, plants and animals, insects in particular, fish, they have natural oils on them, and they, you know, get those natural oils get released into the water. And then when the water becomes turbulent, either from the wind or a boat, it breaks the surface tension of the water. And then that surface tension, you know, makes bubbles or foam. So excellent question there. Trying to think of what are some other weird things we've seen in the lake. Actually, just yesterday, the Loon Preservation Committee reached out to us, and one of their biologists saw a weird circular vortex, really fast moving patch of water, a circular on the lake up at Guile Pond in Sutton. And I'm still sort of searching that out, but it looked like it could have been a whole mass of fish swimming around really fast in circles, or the formation of a water spout. And a water spout is like a water tornado on lakes. And water spouts are pretty interesting. They can happen, you know, in really poor, bad weather, but they can also happen in bright, beautiful days when it's really hot and there's a high patch of humid air right above the water surface. And so our colleagues at DES are leaning towards the water spout explanation. So that's pretty exciting.
I really liked the idea of the fish tornado, though. You know, just fish swimming so quickly beneath the surface. I'm sure, you know, that certainly happens.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat box about lake oddities related to COVID-19. And I think that the most observable oddity, if we can call it that, is that our lakes are extremely busy right now. So many people are out recreating. Folks that typically occupy their lakefront properties seasonally, or maybe for only a month out of the year, are now here full time, sometimes with extended family. They've come to hunker down to get through this together in an area that is less densely populated. So I think that, you know, our lakes are getting a lot more use. Our septic systems are getting a lot more use. And we'll probably, you know, learn more about that just as time goes on, what the repercussions of that are.
I see another question here from Linda. The aging of lakes. Lake Winnipesaukee is considered a newer lake, so how many years would it be to consider an older lake? Is it based on depth? You know, Linda, that's a great question. And really, a lake moving from, you know, a oligotrophic, so a young, low nutrient stage, to a more older mesotrophic or eutrophic, more nutrient enriched stage, that's going to, for a lake like Lake Winnipesaukee, you know, naturally that's going to occur over thousands and thousands of years. And it is somewhat based on depth because, you know, it's the filling up of that basin with stuff. So, you know, decayed plants, decayed algae. So yeah, generally, you know, a deeper glacial lake, like Winnipesaukee or Newfound or Squam, it's going to take a lot longer to fill in and become nutrient enriched, a lot more water there. So there's no real formula other than, you know, and then of course, you know, what is done around on the landscape will, as Krystal was talking about, accelerate how fast that lake fills in. You know, when we remove trees and shrubs off the landscape, we're allowing more soil to get into the lake, and that's, you know, allowing more plants to grow. And so that's how we're contributing to those basins filling up faster. I see another question about geese poop. And, you know, this is another popular question I've gotten. You know, Andrea, what do we do about the geese?
And these are shrubs.
The Canada geese, you know, they're beautiful birds, but they're dirty birds. They really love to be able to munch on a beautiful green manicured lawn, and they love to be able to see the water, so that if anything comes down the hill at them, any sort of predator, maybe your dog, they can easily scoot off into the water and to return to safety. So geese geese poop. They poop nearly 2 to 3 pounds a day, and their poop is very, very high in phosphorus. Again, that nutrient that makes plants and algae and cyanobacteria grow. And they can also contain bacteria. Their poop contain bacteria, which makes it unsafe to swim. So unfortunately, humans, we've sort of rolled out the welcome mat for geese, because unfortunately, a lot of us, or some of us, have that green grassy lawn right down to the shoreline. And again, that's the welcome mat for the geese. If you have a goose problem on your property, we highly recommend, and we would recommend this also through our Lake Smart program, you're going to want to have a vegetated buffer along between separating your lawn from the water, at least 3 feet high of a variety of shrubby plants, so that the geese aren't going to be able to sit on your lawn and see the water. We need to obstruct their view. If they can't see the water from your lawn, they're probably not going to want to hang out on your lawn. So
it's true for sandy beaches too. Sandy beaches are
Yes.
relatively inviting. And so how can we sort of break up that landscape and make it a little bit more fragmented with some vegetation that, a predator could potentially be hiding behind? So if you have a no-mow area of your lawn, if you encourage some vegetation to grow at the very front of your sandy beach area, or allow that to creep in along the sides, it's going to make it a lot less appealing for geese to come and hang out.
Right, and you definitely don't want to feed the geese or the ducks. They get plenty of food as it is, and actually feeding them is not real healthy for them. The natural food's much better for their system, and there's plenty of it around. So I know I have come across plenty of folks in my career who really enjoy feeding the waterfowl, and we just say, please don't. It's not good for them, it's not good for the lake, and it's not good for your property.
Andrea, we've got a question about beavers, and this is one that I don't know the answer to. Do beavers contribute significant amounts of phosphorus and nutrients to the lake? And I'd be curious about that, because typically beaver habitat isn't in our lakes, it's on the fringes of lakes and in the wetlands. And the reality of wetlands, even though, sometimes we can feel like they're a bit of an inconvenience, they're actually a place for nutrients and pollution to settle out before getting into the lake. So is there anything else about beavers? And
I know it's kind of a complicated question. Certainly, if there is a beaver dam on a tributary or a wetland, system that eventually drains into your lake, I do know that if that beaver dam, it's holding up a bunch of water behind it. It's ponding a bunch of water out. If for some reason all of a sudden that dam is breached, or a catastrophic failure of that beaver dam, all of a sudden all of that water that was held back behind the beaver dam is going to go rushing into the lake. And that would be a huge source, huge, volume of water going really fast, bringing in lots of nutrients, erosion, and potentially bacteria, giardia as well into the lake. So beavers are mostly a problem with, changing the natural ways in which water flows into and out of lakes. So some lakes that have had this problem have worked with engineers on getting special types of culverts installed, in the vicinity of beavers. Granite Lake Association out near the Stoddard area, they installed a beaver deceiver, which is essentially a pipe that helps with some grates on it so that the beavers can't, plug it up. I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but you know, if you look up beaver deceiver, you're going to see a special sort of culvert that has some protection so that the water can still flow even if there's a beaver dam in the vicinity. And that installation has been very successful at Granite Lake. They were having some huge runoff issues and storm surge issues there related to the beaver damming on one of the inlets to the lake.
And Andrea, you're exactly the right person for this question. We have another one about monitoring for pollution and toxins from inlets, water flowing into our lakes. How do lake residents know that the water coming into the lake is clean, that their lake water is clean? How do they identify hot spots and where the problem areas are so that they know how to change it?
Great question. And there are 2 volunteer-based water quality monitoring programs in New Hampshire. I used to coordinate the program, the Volunteer Lake Assessment Program with the Department of Environmental Services. There's the UNH Lay Lakes Monitoring Program, but essentially through those 2 programs, you know, an army of volunteers at lakes throughout the state help biologists take water samples from various parts in the lake to measure various levels of nutrients and other things, and also help biologists take samples of water from inlets, so tributaries, rivers that flow into lakes. And sometimes volunteers even help biologists do what's called storm sampling. So if there's a big rainstorm coming, you know, taking water samples after the runoff from the storm happens. And then collecting bottles of water essentially and having them then analyzed for various parameters in the laboratory after the fact. And sometimes even sampling on a particular river or stream that drains into a lake at different locations upstream to try to pinpoint certain areas on that stream that could potentially be causing pollution. Maybe there's a farm or a forestry operation, or maybe, you know, a new construction building or something. So biologists, with the help of volunteers, are doing a lot of sampling throughout the state to help pinpoint sources of pollution to our lakes in real time with water quality data.
And it's worth noting for, you know, lake communities that have a real concern about their lake. Some lakes do actually work with environmental consulting companies that offer this kind of service to go around and sample water within the watershed. And, you know, they'll send people out in the middle of the night after there's been an inch of rainstorm to catch that peak flow to get the best snapshot. And so that is an option for some folks too.
Absolutely. All right.
More questions.
Lots of great questions.
So it is, it's getting a little later. It's about 7:52. So we have a couple more minutes if folks want to send in some questions here towards the end.
All right.
Maybe we can do this like class and we could call on people. Shirley, I see you laughing.
Oh boy.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, it's a beautiful evening where you're getting out of class a little early tonight. So I hope you enjoy the evening. And I do encourage you to go to our website and check out the different questions and articles on there. And we had another question: how badly do power boats pollute the lakes? So great question. Power boats, so usually, you know, they use some sort of fuel, gasoline, sometimes diesel. For the most part, there's not a huge pollution concern with power boats because the exhaust basically goes into the atmosphere and dissipates. Of course, if you have one of the older motor technology, you know, the 2-cycle that you then, you know, pour in the oil and it mixes with the gas, or those are more polluting. They're less efficient than the newer, you know, cleaner burning engines. So if you have an old boat, real old boat, and you're pouring, you know, it's 2-cycle, or you're pouring oil and gas and mixing it together, probably time to upgrade your boating technology. But most of the boats these days, as long as they're maintained properly and care is taken when fueling them, and that you're making sure none of the oily bilge water is being dumped into the lake, they're way better and much less of a pollution concern than before. So great question. And with that, I think we should let these fine people go. You will receive a email evaluation in just a few minutes. Again, let us know how we did. And let us know what you want to learn about in future sessions. You'll receive an email tomorrow with links to this webinar and slides. I challenge everyone to share this presentation with someone who wasn't here today. Help spread the word. And I do hope you'll tune in for our next 2 sessions next week. Again, we'll have Amy Smagula talking about the management of plants, and then so excited to have Fish and Game with us to talk about the management of fish. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Krystal. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, board members Shirley and Bob.
Good night.
All right, good night.